14-year-old undergoing rape, it just messes up their whole situation. I mean, they can't sit in classrooms anymore. They can't be surrounded by people anymore. Everything is just, they just can't function in the way that they did previously. They're completely different people. And to expect and go out and work and make a living and things like that, it's almost impossible.
Alrighty, so thanks everyone for tuning to this episode of Find Your Cause. Today we have David Thiruselvam, who's the founder of Victim Recovery Law. David, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Joseph. Thanks for having me.
Yes, so we had a quick chat before we started rolling here, but I'm excited about this interview because it's an industry that I think a lot of people are intimidated by because of the complexity, because of the nuance, because a lot of times people aren't engaged with this industry unless it's for a lot of times more negative reasons than positive. And we'll get into all that. But before we do, David, what is Victim Recovery Law?
So our law firm, Victim Recovery Law Center, is basically a law firm that's designed to help victims of crime recover some kind of award aside from what they have to do in the criminal area. Usually when a crime is convicted and you're a victim, you're expected to go and testify or help the prosecution get the charges to stick against the person that did that to them. And very often after that, the victim is forgotten. They may have a few programs here and there, hey, go and check this out, but nothing really is geared towards the victim. It's more geared towards putting this person away. And that's, I think, the void we fill. We try and actually get some kind of measures of relief for the victim so that they can go about their lives without just having their broken lives, and some kind of measure of access to care and things like that that they can get. That's what we do.
Awesome. And why you? Why is this something you're dedicated a large portion of your life towards? Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, it's not something that came at me from the beginning. It was not even something that came at me when I started my legal career. As a matter of fact, for the first 10 years of my career, I was criminal defense. Then I went over on the civil side and I worked in various different firms. And there was the last firm I worked at, I saw there was a particular attorney that was handling cases like this. And I was fascinated by it. He was actually helping victims of crime. And then I found out there was an organization, a national organization made up of attorneys similar to that around the country that were all in touch with each other and helping each other. It was also functioning in this way. And so I left the firm and started my own firm with the idea of providing this kind of service. And it's not something we do. There are a lot of firms that they have various different branches to what they do. Plaintiff firms, personal injury firms, whether it's motor vehicle accidents or medical malpractice. They have all these different areas for personal injury. We pretty much, this is all we do. They might have this as an extra case that they do in order to go ahead and bolster their whole caseload. But these are all the cases that we do. And we've dedicated our firm to just this particular practice.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of people listening have also felt this as well. But as I'm driving down the highway, I don't remember ever seeing this many law firms advertising to me. And I think at the international basis, we'll probably attest to this, that the U.S. comes off as a very litigious country. I'd love to hear your point of view and philosophy on that, and where that's a very positive thing and where it might not be as positive of a thing.
Sure. It started way back during the early parts of this country when there was a case, Marbury versus Madison, which basically said, listen, all questions as far as whether it's constitutional or not, it's for the Supreme Court to decide. They took those powers upon themselves. Now, if you go to other countries like Britain or some of the other countries that have democracies, they just go in some kind of back room and, hey, listen, is this new rule adhere to the Constitution? Yeah, we think so. And they come up with that. And they make their own judgment of it. Whereas with our form of government, with the legislature, with the executive, and with the legal branch said, no, we're going to be the final arbiters. And they took that power for themselves. That's unique, actually, in most countries. Now, because they did that, it's flowed from that any ultimate question has to go to the courts. And this is not just for regular people. This is actually for the legislatures. If they pass a law, there have been several, actually probably hundreds of examples over the years where they've passed a law and the Supreme Court said, no, this violates the Constitution. So go back and do it again, or go back and come up with a different law that counters what you're trying to do and will be more in line with the Constitution. So they make that kind of ruling. Now, once you have a power like that deciding that there, when it trickles down lower, anything you want to do ultimately is, what do the courts say? You have to go to the courts and have so our system is designed that way, to where the courts have the final say. And because of that, there's a good and bad in that. Because of that, it drew a lot of people to say, let's go ahead and work in this system. And a lot of lawyers came out there. Now, also the civil side that draws a lot. Obviously, the most obvious thing is the criminal side, where you got people defending people, prosecuting people. But the whole civil side does not exist in a lot of other countries. For example, you had a building that burnt down, I believe it was in Miami. And there were lawsuits because of the design of that building and the way it came down and all those kind of things. Now, at the same time, you had a building in England, in London, that burnt down. Those people had no recourse.
Okay.
Courts and say, hey, listen, this person did something wrong. Now, I knew the firm that handled that. And they even tried to go to the extent to say, hey, wait a second. The person, the architect, was located in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
We see if we can sue them. They had to go to that extent to bring that case that happened in England over here in order to get some kind of recourse for those people. So not all countries look at it the same way. Some countries really frown and say, what do you mean you're going to sue for civil justice? What do you mean you're going to sue for monetary damages from this corporation and things like that? In the US, they say corporations have liabilities too, and they have responsibilities. And if you don't take those responsibilities seriously, there's a price to pay. And that's the difference in this country. I don't think everybody else feels that way necessarily.
Yeah. And I think that's the examples you shared about the building collapsing is a great example of bringing a story to explain this. And I think how the pros and cons, and I love your opinion on this too, is I feel like it makes justice, depending on your opinion of justice, more approachable and more possible. Because like you said, people in the London example didn't know that was something that they could do. So there's like an education gap there. If somebody lost a family member or at the very least their home, they could file and they have a process of getting that back. On the other hand, you have the examples of, I think the expression is like ambulance chasers or something, where it's such a litigious society that people are trying to take advantage of the system.
Sure, the coffee was too hot. That's one of the examples that everybody heard about coffee. You got hot coffee. What do you expect? Of course it was hot, right?
Oh my gosh. That was
so that's one
example,
of the
right?
examples that stand out there. Why people, oh my God, these guys are just doing anything. But yeah, that would be an example.
And how do you draw a line in that example? Like, how do you draw a line between like really people that was like a bonehead move, the coffee says hot? Like, how do you draw a line? And it's probably a philosophical question. And how have you, maybe in your, since this is your career, how have you been able to determine if people come to you and be like, that is a stretch, that is taking advantage of the system, or this is a really serious thing that we absolutely need to get to file a lawsuit or example from? Like, how have you drawn that line, and how has that evolved over time from your experience?
Well, one of the things to understand is some of these cases that sound ridiculous, right? That they win, right? And when you read the paper and you go, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Coffee was too hot, right? Then if you just leave it at that, person ordered a coffee that's supposed to come hot. They got burnt because they spilt it on themselves. Now, what is the problem, right? And naturally you go, Jesus, these people are abusing the courts. If you go a little deeper, and this is where people don't go. It's like, how could that possibly have happened? Because the jury of their peers, there's 12 people sitting up there, and they made that decision. They weren't all a bunch of crazy people that were just leaning to one side. What happened is that they found that the temperature was so extreme, it was hot enough to melt plastic, right? They just made that coffee so hot that it did not need to be that way, right? That it caused second-degree burns and things like that and all that. You don't need it that hot. Right? You have to take into consideration. So unless you hear something like that, right? You go, okay, all right. Yeah. If it's burning and melting plastic, maybe that was a little too hot, right?
Yeah.
And you start thinking about things like that. You get into a little bit more into the cases. Now, I will grant you, there are examples out there of just ridiculous verdicts of cases in which there's people like, I can't believe, number one, you brought that case, and number two, you actually won that case, right?
Yeah.
There are examples of that. Those are fewer than you would think. Okay,
that's what I would guess. Yeah,
you have a corrective measure today. You got appellate courts, you got all those kind of things, and usually the jury gets it right. Okay, sometimes that's
heartening. That's heartening to hear. We hope that, right? We hope that.
No, they do. Now there are but there are juries in certain jurisdictions and juries in other jurisdictions, right? There's certain jurisdictions with a lot more conservative. They might go, oh my God, you were really injured. Here's $20,000.
Yep.
Person hearing those same cases in a more liberal or a different minded citizenry, they might say, "Oh my God, you were really hurt. Here's $100,000." So you've got the same case, right?
Mm.
Same set of facts, but just because of where you brought it, the jurors in that particular area felt the worth of it. You know?
Yeah, yeah, and this is huge, and I want to dive into that specifically. Is I think the reason why, at least me personally, before this conversation, lean towards us being like a litigious country, and people are going to be taking more advantage of it, is because I think of the small business coffee shop where somebody saw that McDonald's example and was like, I'm going to take advantage. I'm going to go buy a coffee. I'm going to small business. I'm going to drop it on myself, maybe get a burn somewhere else, and then go to court and literally causes small business to close down. So that's what I am concerned about. And I'm sure other people are as well. But at the same time, you use the example of the same outcome could be 20,000 versus 100, and that could be
Right.
like a business closing and going bankrupt versus not. How, all this to say the question, how is that amount determined? Yeah.
Before I get to that, let me get to your first part of your question.
Yeah.
And that is that people pull off these kind of things like, oh my God, I'll spill it on myself, or I'll fake an accident, right?
Mm.
And go make a claim for it and things like that. And these things do occur. Okay. They're not as much as some people will claim, but
Yep.
they do occur, right? And there are attorneys that may represent them anyway, right? But what you have to understand is in those particular situations, a lot of times the people on the other side will say, you know what, this is a pain. Let's just go ahead and settle it real quickly and move on. And
Yeah.
when they do that and concede that, you're encouraging the behavior of the person to say,
Mm.
let's get a little, because the other side might say, in order to go ahead and fight this and take it all the way to court and win it, and we think we can win it, it's going to take twice as much to get a zero verdict on it. And
Yeah.
so a lot of it is it's a calculation
Yeah.
based on what's it worth, when do we draw the line, and things like that. But that unfortunately may keep people doing the same kind of behavior, the same kind of action, because they're
Yeah.
going to get something. And I worked for an insurance company at one time on the defense, and I would see that over and over again. What are you settling this for? This guy's so obviously either faking it, or they faked there was no real injury or anything like that. But the company was like, hey, we could just let this go and go by. We give them
Oh,
some.
it's frustrating. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Unfortunately, they drummed that up to make it seem more as a norm than it is. Those are the exceptions to the case. There's always somebody abusing the system in any kind of
Yeah.
situation. And yeah, those do agree. But I think that the only way you cut that out is by standing firm and go, look, bring it on. We're going to fight this. We think you're full of it. We think you're making this up and things like that. If you
Yeah.
really believe that, then you fight it. You don't reward them just for the sake of saying, let's just move on to the next one and give them a few pennies. It doesn't work that way. But going on to the second part of your question, which I'm sorry I forgot.
Yeah, no, it's like you gave the example of the 20,000 versus 100,000, two very
Sure.
different, outcomes,
Right.
but the same instance or
Right.
occurrence. Yeah.
It happens all the time, and it's forum shopping. Lawyers know where the big verdicts are, where they're not. They'll try and find a way to bring it into a county or into an area where the jury pool is more likely going to be favorable to a larger verdict. And that's all part of lawyering. That's all part of what they do, right? When you sit back as a juror, you may think that, hey, how did this happen? How did this get such a big verdict here? And how is it here? It just happens to be the people, and the people decide. In this particular, let's say a big city, they might be used to more numbers and higher numbers and things like that. And so maybe $1 million is not that big a deal, right? Whereas you go out to maybe a rural area, right? Where a guy's just doing a blue collar job, or he's working as a farmer or whatever it is and everything like that. $1 million is something he doesn't think about very often, right? So he might be like, hey, just 50,000, right? That's a lot of money. Go ahead. And that same case got such a big different result.
Last question, then we'll get into some of the examples, cases that you've worked on, is where is the intersection between, in some of the much more severe cases where there's loss of life, between insurance and the legal proceedings that come after that?
I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, so for example, if I have life insurance and I were to pass away in some freak accident, like a fire at a business or something, and my family will get the life insurance check from me passing away, depending on my life insurance. But my wife then wants to press charges because maybe there was some malfunction, or maybe the exits of the building weren't clearly where it was like blatant. Yeah, is that they come to you for representation and you win the case. Is that usually just the insurance claims and that whole process are completely separate? I'm guessing, right? They're not
Well,
overlapping at any means.
yes.
Yeah.
And I can speak for the jurisdictions that I practice in.
Yeah.
True, they have specific rules saying that, listen, the person that lost that case that has to pay cannot say, oh, by the way, you got paid $100,000 by the insurance, so I should get credit for that and pay you even less, even though you got, let's say, a $500,000 verdict, right? But you
Right.
got $100,000 from your insurance, so I should only have to give you four. No, it doesn't work that way. You don't get to get credit from another person that's already paid out to you. You have to pay out exactly what it is that you were found liable for. So
Yep.
they don't get to do that mostly in the jurisdictions that I practiced in. I imagine there's probably some jurisdictions that allow them to go ahead and have
Yeah.
it set up, right? But the example you gave is exactly right. If they go back and say, hey, listen, they had the doors blocked off, they couldn't leave, or hey, the alarm didn't go off, people didn't even know until the fire came up, and those kind of things are cases that happen all the time.
Yeah.
They don't even consider whether the individual had insurance or not. That's usually not part of the situation.
Okay. Got it. All right. Thank you for that. And thank you for that baseline foundation of this sector in this industry. So victim recovery law, what are some of the cases that you all focus on? I know you mentioned that you wanted to found this organization having a very specific focus. So what are some of the example cases that maybe you started with, and how has that evolved to today?
The cases that we primarily deal with are victims of violent crime, shooting victims primarily. We have quite a few sexual assault cases, rape cases, where there were opportunities to prevent it from happening and a duty to prevent it from happening by either a nightclub or a bar, or for one instance is a mall. Two 14-year-old girls that happened to be at a mall 30 days apart, and he's still able to go ahead and do this. He got convicted of raping 10 girls, but two of these were on the mall 30 days apart, 14-year-old girls. And they did not even know that they had any kind of ability to bring the case like this. I think the mother of one of the girls ran across our ad or something like that, like 4 or 5 years later. Now, because they were so young, it
Yep.
was still a viable case, okay? The statute of limitations hadn't run out, right? So we were still able to bring a case. And the thing is, look, a woman undergoing rape is one of the most horrific things anyway, but a 14-year-old undergoing rape, it just messes up their whole situation. They can't sit in classrooms anymore. They can't be surrounded by people anymore. Everything is just, they just can't function in the way that they did previously. They're completely different people. And to expect and go out and work and make a living and things like that, it's almost impossible. We were able to get a significant enough result in that case to where the girls were able to purchase homes and get a check for the next 50 years.
Yeah. Why do you think that mother did not know this was an option? And why, two questions, and I'll bring them back. And why do you think that the mall in this example was responsible for that?
Okay. Teresa's first question. Why did the mother know that there was an option? Because most people don't know that there's an option. I'm sad to say even some lawyers don't know that this particular relief exists, okay? That you can actually sue on behalf of crime victims, right? It's an idea or it's a practice that's not really out there. It's not as common as a medical malpractice. Somebody may left the forceps inside the person. It's not as common as that. So because of that, a lot of people don't know about it. And she just happened to come across something that alerted her and contacted us, and she would be in the norm of most people out there.
Yeah.
Most people have no idea. And I can't tell you, and it's heartbreaking, the number of people that find out about this after the statute of limitations has expired and we can no longer bring a case. No?
What is the statute of limitations and what is the time?
Okay, so that varies with every state. Okay, for example, in Pennsylvania, it's 2 years. Okay, from the time of incident up until the expiration.
And that's what statute of limitations is, from the time
Correct.
of incident and when you can. Okay, gotcha.
From the time of incident then, right? New York is 3 years, right? Florida used to be 4 years. I think they've cut it back to 2 years now. But it varies in your state, and it's very important to know it about your state. Some states, I think, are as short as 1 year, okay? And within that year, you got to get a lawyer, and they got to file a suit, and they got to bring an action. If you don't, that's it. You're done, okay? And the other thing is there are other scenarios where it's a different case. For example, if you're a minor, you have up until your 20th birthday, 2 years after your majority, okay? An exception to that would be a minor who has been sexually assaulted by a person who is an adult, right? In Pennsylvania, anyway, you have up until the age of 30. right? So they've expanded it more for people in that kind of situation, right? And there are various exceptions like that all over the country where they deal with different scenarios. So it's very important to find out how much time you have and get to a lawyer right away, because that's the worst thing in the world. I can't tell you how many people right after it expired, they came to me. I was like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. There's nothing I can do. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
time expired.
This is bringing me to just a thought on, and it, probably because I've been reading it recently, but pros and cons of smartphones. I think one of the pros, especially with this conversation, is I hope that like getting raped in broad daylight are happening much less than they have in the past, because people are recording always. CCTVs are more so than ever. So I don't know if you've been in the industry long enough to see that, but I'm hoping that there's a trajectory downwards of these things happening because of the advances in technology, especially smartphones and cameras, etc.
I don't know if it's a downward trajectory so much as they're just getting caught more.
Good.
You know,
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
it is. I think your question implied was because they can get caught, there are few of these events happening.
Yeah. You'd hope.
I wish I could say that,
You'd hope
but
so.
yeah, I
Yeah.
wish I could say that, but the numbers really don't support that. The numbers just
Man.
sort of show that they're just getting caught more.
Yeah.
Nobody thinks they're getting caught, right? Everybody commits a crime. They don't think they're getting caught, or they don't care about getting caught. For the most part, they don't think it's being recorded. And
Yeah.
then somebody records them, and out of the blue, here you have that. It starts with even with police cases, police abuse cases, and things like that. For years or decades or whatever, it was their word saying, no, it didn't happen like that. And people tended to take the police officer's viewpoint, right?
Yeah.
Until you have case after case after case coming up from video going, this is not what you said at all. And that has changed the behavior of the police. That's changed behavior of police departments, where
Yep.
now they have cameras themselves and things like that. And I think that has restored the faith of the public in the police a little bit more, because, okay, now you guys are being held accountable too.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah.
And then great transition, accountability for the mall. Part two of the question was, why do you think it was the mall's responsibility? Was it like a lapse in their security camera coverage? Was it because this is a repeat offender? You had all like knowledge to prevent something. Like where does that responsibility get attributed?
Okay. So one of the keys is notice. Does the defense, are they put on notice that something could happen? Okay. Are they put on notice of crime in the area in general, of crime of this particular nature, right? Do they happen to know maybe of this individual? In this particular case, it was all of the above. There was crime known to be around in the area, and we could prove that based on crime statistics that we got from the police. Number two, this particular individual is known to them. He was causing mayhem all over the place. They actually posted his picture and said, do not let him on the premises. Okay. Now they have security patrolling around, but yet he was able to do this in broad daylight. This wasn't a nighttime thing that he did. Broad daylight. He lured one of the girls out there, shoved her behind an object. And all of this also at the same time is all within their video cameras. So you have
Yeah.
video cameras trained in this area. Supposedly they have somebody watching the video cameras. So their own security measures failed, right? One thing is they didn't have enough security measures. And the other thing is that the security measures that they did have failed. Okay.
Yeah.
So we were able to show that they didn't care. They weren't up to snuff. This guy, matter of fact, was caught in the bathroom inside with an underage girl, right? Previously, he was stopped by the guards and they just let him go.
Yeah.
They didn't even check to see if the girl was underage, and she was. And they just let him go. There was just a very lax feeling about that. Part of our settlement with them was that they were supposed to have cameras placed on the outer rim area where something like this could happen. We put that as part of our demand when we actually settled the case.
Yeah. Wow. I'd love to hear some other examples and stories of people that you've worked with and outcomes you've helped achieve. Yeah.
Okay, just to give you some different situations, we've had people shot. Now, a recent phenomenon within the last, I'd say, 5 years that we've seen is that gas stations, right? People have learned, at least I'm talking about the city of Philadelphia, that, hey, people are pumping gas. If I want to go rob somebody and get their car, here I got a guy putting gas in the car with the keys in his hand. I can just go up there, get the car, and drive off with a full tank of gas, right? And this is happening over and over again. A lot of times if they resist, they were getting shot, right? The gas stations were just ignoring it like it wasn't happening. But you could see the trend go up. Some of the gas stations actually hired a security guard company to
Wow.
patrol, right? and their numbers went down. But not all of them did, even though they had incidents happen. So we've had incidents against gas companies, gas stations, where they just fail to protect their people, even though incidents have happened previously in their area. And they could be in really bad neighborhoods where crime happens all the time. You have a duty when you invite somebody, at least in Pennsylvania, when you invite somebody onto your premises to do business, you have a heightened duty. Maybe you have to go ahead and make sure that these people are protected of both dangers that you should know of or you actually know of. Okay. And that could go to, what are you doing as far as a should know of? What are you doing as far as figuring out what's going on in the neighborhood around you? What are you doing as far as making sure that if somebody comes out to assault one of your customers, that you have the ability to respond? And they usually don't do that. Businesses, that's an expense.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's where my mind was going. Is you
putting
mentioning
out that expense,
heightened duty? Yeah,
right,
yep.
that expense is not necessarily giving them a return in their pocket, right? For example, you buy certain items for your store in the gas station, you're going to get something back from it. If you expend for a security guard, you're not necessarily getting back, right? But that's a requirement to protect the people that are out there. And maybe eventually people say they have guards there. I'm going to go ahead and go there. There's one situation I've heard of recently where they did have guards. They figured it was too expensive and they let them go. A week later, somebody was shot and killed on their property. So you have these kind of situations all the time. We have various different scenarios. We've had some pretty strange scenarios. We've had one where a man and woman were in a hotel room, and at night, midnight, she said something really upset him. He walked across the street to the gas station. He got a coffee cup, and he asked the woman for a dollar's worth of gas in a coffee cup. She sold him a dollar's worth of gas in a coffee cup. He comes back in over. He goes to the same woman and asks her for matches. She gives him matches. He walks back, goes into the room, pours it on her face, and lights her on fire. She burned to death. The building burnt down. It was just a horrendous thing that happened. And you start out with the gas station, right?
Yep.
Come on. What were you guys thinking? First of all, there are certain containers by law that you can only fill in gas with, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that was an obvious thing. And then even then, look, if the guy pulled up in a car, maybe you can say maybe he needs a little gas to restart the car or something like that. But he didn't pull up in a car. He walked over there. So what does he need matches for? There's all those kind of things. And we found out there were other locations that he was supposed to be in that he wasn't supposed to be out. And the woman had 4 children that were left behind. And so, yeah, that was actually ended up being quite a big case that we had. As far as a different kind of situation, we've had a domestic terrorism case. We had a police officer just sitting in his car in an area in West Philadelphia, and it was on film. There was a man dressed in full white Muslim garb, ran at him firing the gun until his gun was inside the window. He shot him 6 times. And this kid, this young police officer, he was all banged up. And the guy ran away and he shot him while he was running away, and he shot him in the tail. So he survived. The police officer survived. And they said, one of his friends a year later said, Dave, can you help him out? The guy claimed to be for ISIS, right? He said, doing this for ISIS. He got convicted. He got a lifetime in prison. But I'm like, who am I supposed to sue in this case? His police officer sitting in the middle of the street. What do you do? Well, we did a little investigation. We found out that the gun that the ISIS guy used belonged to another police officer. That police officer said, yeah, I went to a bar and I was seeing this girl and I got drunk. I lost the gun. And so we got his homeowners, right? But then we really stepped out of bounds. We decided to do something we'd never done. We talked to the FBI and we sued the mosque for radicalizing the guy. Something really you don't see done a whole lot.
Yeah.
We went through a lot of ups and downs with that, but we had one chief witness who really got concerned. He thought he was going to get killed. And so so we couldn't proceed with that particular theory. So we had so many different areas where, more than just a regular shooting or something like that, where scenarios we've confronted.
Yeah. So thank you for those examples. I think these are stories that people just don't hear in their day to day. Question, we kind of touched on the lack of education of people coming forward if they have been a victim. Other than lack of knowing that this is something that you could come forward about, what would you advise to the girl or woman or boy that maybe has been sexually harassed or sexually abused as to kind of make finding a law firm to help support them just more approachable? What advice would you give somebody to alleviate their concerns? Yeah.
First thing you can do, obviously, you can do is just simple Google search of firms that represent victims of crime. A few firms will pop up. You can start calling them. Now, they will tell you not every case is something that's actionable. Okay. For example, there's harassment and that they really may feel offended. I've had ladies that call me, this person's harassing me, this, that, and everything else. I feel offended, this, that, and everything else. But it doesn't rise to the level that you can actually have an actionable case, or it isn't a target where they can actually go recover from. Okay. That'll be explained to them. Because these cases also, there's a reason why a whole lot of lawyers don't do these cases. For example, let's take the car accident case, for example. You got a lot of lawyers that do that, right? It doesn't take a whole lot of money to complete one of those cases, okay?
Yeah.
You can do those cases for $500 to $1,500 and you can finish a case and settle it and keep moving on. And that's your investment, right? Cases like these, very often you're in the 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, $70,000 that you're putting out of your pocket. And if you lose, you eat that, right?
Yep.
That doesn't necessarily contribute to that. And not a lot of people want to do that, number one, take that kind of a risk. And number two, and this is a very important part, and this is something that we really do at our particular firm, you have to be prepared to go to trial. Not a lot of people either want to go to trial or, to tell you the truth, are equipped to go to trial. Because you see, the defense usually has a book on you. Okay, is this the kind of firm that just talks a lot and then they just take whatever you give them? Or is this a firm that will try a case? Now, when I first started my career with my own firm, I noticed that a lot of the awards, the offers were not very high. And I knew if there's a certain firm across town that they had come to them, they would have been a much higher. And it really upset me, right? And I had to change that. I had to change that view about our firm. So we started going to trial. We started going trial after trial, and we had started winning enough to where that changed their attitude towards us. So we take listen, there is no client that has ever wanted to go to trial that I've talked them out of and said, no, I don't think you should, or whatever. If they want to go to trial, that's their day in court or whatever, we go to trial. You have to have that as a strong base. And unfortunately, and this is what I would say to people out there looking for firms, look to see if the firm has a strong trial background, right? Because ultimately, the defense said, go pound sand. We're not giving you anything. What are you going to do then, right? You're going to go back to your client and say, listen, they're not going, just why don't you just take this a little bit here so they can keep moving on and recoup some of their, that's what it comes down to, a business decision. It should never be, it should be, listen, you want to go to trial, let's go to trial. These guys are not taking this seriously, or they're not giving it the value that it should be. Let's try the case. And we will go to battle. And our particular firm is designed for that. The people that we have in the firm, when we go to trial as a team. Each person has their own designated duties. It's a division of labor, and we go in there, and our aim is to go in there and kick some butt. And we want our clients to know that they have that behind them, right?
Quick question on that, related to a sexual assault victim. Say some minor girl was sexually assaulted in the past. They got justice from the perpetrator, and very similar to the story you shared, like the trauma of going through something like that has just impacted them in all aspects of life. And like financially, for example, maybe they can't hold a job, or they're suffering from a lot of other PTSD trauma. Can they come back then and have a conversation with you and see if there's something that maybe was missed in the example of the mall that they should reevaluate? Or somebody in that instance, what would you advise them to do?
Usually when you settle a case, that's it. There's no revisiting it. No, hey, I didn't consider this. Or, oh my God, now I've got this situation to consider. All of those considerations should be taken place right before you settle, okay? And the settlement paperwork will contain language that would prevent this person to come back and do that. So that's going to be negated right away. That's going to be explained to the victim. Listen, this is it. If you're satisfied with this, that's fine. But if you're not, you have to think of some alternative. But you're not coming back after taking the money and saying, hey, listen, how about a little bit more? No, that almost never, ever exists.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's helpful clarification there. Somehow it's been 37 minutes of talking with you, David. Time is flying. The future we have for victim recovery law, what do you hope to look back 10 years from now and see?
I don't know. Look, there are cases that we have big verdicts on and that we like to help people. And obviously, a big verdict is a big boost and everything like that. But there are certain things where we actually help change society. Let me give you an example. I don't know if you heard about ghost guns. Ghost guns, what happened about 8 years ago, ghost guns started appearing in society. And they're called ghost guns because there's no traceable number on them. There's nothing to say, this gun was responsible for that killing. This gun was responsible for that shooting, because there's nothing on them. Okay? They're ghost guns. That's why all guns must have markings on them. Ghost guns came in existence in a very real sense when it was under the first Trump administration. They decided to manufacture these guns as a kit and would sell them as kits all over the place. Now, you had a huge spike in shootings, especially by a lot of juveniles in all these cities. So these cities saw this huge spike, and they decided to sue the ghost gun manufacturer. Right?
Yeah.
And they were doing that. And then what happened was, I believe our firm was the first in the country. There was one in LA that came soon after. We started suing on behalf of actual families of victims who got killed.
Yep.
We had 3 different victims, took 10 bullets each. Juveniles, one was a 14-year-old, right? Shot by another 14-year-old, right? Got a hold of this ghost gun. So we started suing the manufacturer. Now they've stopped production, and now they're like not paying for their lawyers, meaning they're running out of money. So while our clients, and recently we just won an award where they did not come to court, and the judge awarded this family $30 million, right?
Yep.
That it's unfortunate on behalf of the family we can't collect this, right? But all of these, and we have 2 more coming up, they have enough of a force against this company. There's no more ghost gun manufacturers by this manufacturer, which is Polymer 80. Those aren't out there anymore. And the numbers have gone down of shootings by ghost guns.
Wow.
And shootings in general have gone down around the cities around the country. So that's one of the big things I think I look back and say we had some kind of measure in actually.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Why was it allowed for ghost guns to be manufactured? I thought they had to by law. Were they finding a loophole of making it called a kit that allowed that, or what?
That's exactly it.
Yep.
They were making a kit. It would almost be like 80% of the kit, but with instructions and other guidance how to make it complete. So they got, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was a 9mm where you could use bullets like that in the gun. They use it. There's no way of tracking it, and it was all these kids were out there.
Yeah.
Each other. It was just a real mess. And the public in general, you may hear about shooting, this, that, and everything else. You don't know that it was done by a ghost gun. You don't know
idea.
It's proliferating and things like that. But no, we made enough of, I think we contributed to all the efforts by everybody else. And that was a definite good feeling.
Yep.
That'll take away.
Yeah. I think that's another side of the coin of a business being put out of business for really lack of morality, whatever it is, however you want it, lack of ethical decision making as a business, to be like, this is probably going to lead to some bad outcomes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Either we change the behavior because of the lawsuit, or, for example, there was another case recently. It was a bar in a very popular section of town. This bar was popular for decades, and they were known as a venue that had a lot of bands, these young bands that come and play, and they had a following. The following would come in and bring more business for the club. What happened was there were 2 young ladies, one 18 and one 21. They accused the bartenders of putting something in their drink, taking them upstairs, and a sexual assault case. So we sued them, and it was enough of a deal where the bands did not want to play at their venue anymore, and they got shut down. And we managed to get a nice award for the young ladies as well. So that's a way we're impacting, we're changing these gas stations. They need to have guards out there. And I'm sorry, you think, my God, what kind of a world are we living in where you're talking about guards at gas stations? I'm sorry, I wish we weren't living in that world like that, right? But that's where we live. And people are getting shot. You can't just ignore it and say, oh, come on, you can't expect them. No, we can. You're inviting people on there to do business with you. You have to be able to keep them safe. And if that means spending a little bit of money, having a security guard on there, that's what you got to do.
Yeah. And you mentioned kind of in that example, when you initially mentioned it, duty as a business. And I feel like, just if I put myself in the shoes of business owners, like, how do you measure that? Like, how do you determine at this point we should take actions to add the simple answer is probably, you know, your area, it's happened before. These are instances and data points that should lead you to taking precautions yourself. But like defining duty is I feel hard as a business owner. So what duty, like, I'm going to create a product and sell a product and focus on that. But yeah, obviously, yeah.
No, that's a good point. It could be the product itself, like the ghost gun. It
Yep.
could be the area that you're operating in, where you're inviting people on, right? It could be the nature of the industry that you're working in, right? Where these things happen all the time. All these things are keys to put an owner on notice, say, hey, listen, you got to take these into consideration. You can't just ignore
Yep.
them and say, I'm just going to sell as many products as I can. The heck with whatever happens. And oh, it's unfortunate.
Yep.
Isn't it terrible? And go on about your life. You can't do that, right? You do have a responsibility for making sure your customers are safe. And yeah, there are experts out there that will do what's called a security audit. You get this guy, you pay him whatever you pay him to, hey, let's do an audit of this whole area and things like that. Let's see what kind of crime there is in the area, what kind of hours that the crime tends to commit. So you may not want a security guard at 8 in the morning, right? But you may want him to be there after 7 p.m. on going into the night. So that right there cuts down on your costs and things like that. You have them later on when it's more likely to happen. But that's an audit that it shows that you made the effort. And if something happens, they can say, hey, listen, we made this effort. We did this. This is what we did. We had a security guard when we thought it was going to be dangerous. And a lot of times it'll be probably found in their favor. They made the
Yep.
effort. What else do you expect?
Yep.
But unfortunately, more often than not, they did nothing.
Yeah. David, I really appreciate your time in handling some of my random questions throughout this interview process. People that are listening and want to learn more or get engaged with you, where should they go? Should they just Google kind of victim recovery law, or what's
Victim
the best way
Recovery
to?
Law Center is our law firm. You can reach us through that. There is the National Crime Victim Bar Association. This is an organization made up of lawyers like us around the country, but they do various different things, like soon the Boy Scouts, the Catholic Church, and things like that for sexual assaults that happen in those kind of situations, all over the place, all around the country. And we all come together usually once a year and we share ideas and things like that. That's when we're going to be in Chicago this year, right?
Yep.
And that's another source you can go to if you'd like in your particular state, because there's somebody in every state that's doing this kind of stuff.
Is there anything you want to leave us with, or anything we missed before we wrap up the interview?
Nothing. I just want to say that I really hope you don't need our service ever. Okay. I
Yeah.
hope life doesn't
Yeah.
happen where you ever need our service. But if you do, please reach out and we're happy to talk to you and we're happy to give you whatever advice you need and actually point you the direction. If we're not the right people to do it in your particular state, we can probably find somebody in your state to do. Okay. Yeah.
Alrighty. David, thank you so much again for your time. We're really honored
Thanks,
to share this
Joseph. Thank you.
story, and thank you for the work that you're doing in helping these victims have some semblance of justice after terrible things have happened. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Joseph.
Thanks.
Take care.